Hello and welcome to the Dead on Arrival podcast, presented by the Reverend Dr. Donald E. Dunnigan Sr. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
In fairness to all of us, I decided that it would be best to break the message that I have down into 3 parts. Of course, the message has 3 points, but sometimes my points aren't straight. They go in different directions. As a matter of fact, they're not points at all. They're just thoughts. And I wanted to share with you today that I got some things on my mind.
All right.
And that's the title or topic that I began this message with on yesterday. And I thought about this as I listened to what Paul was writing in Philippians chapter 3, verse 12. He said, I don't mean to say that I have already achieved these things. And when I read those words, I asked myself, what things was Paul talking about? And then I went back to look at the references that he made to some things that he may have been talking about. And I came up with the thought that I've got some things on my mind. And the first thing that I mentioned on yesterday is the things which have happened in 2022, but the things which have happened to all of us. We think back on some of the things which have happened in our lives. Have you ever reflected on some of the things that have happened in your life? And some of them you have some clarity around perhaps what the meaning of those things were, and then others, you're just still their mystery. Some things we understand, and some things we simply don't understand. And I shared with you on yesterday, there were 3 ways to process the things which have happened. One is in a circular way, and I saw something like that for the new year, but the circular concept of processing the things which have happened is that life goes in a circle and nothing significant ever happens or changes. It's the same thing over and over again. That's one way that sometimes people think about life. You might hear them say, same soup, just reheated over. Same thing, just over again. 22 is the same as 21, and 23 will be the same as 22. Nothing changes. Then there's another way to process the things which have happened, and that is a linear way in which you can see that there is something happening. You go from point A to point B. And then in the third way, I thought of it as a theological way. I thought theological would be a much simpler way to categorize what I was trying to convey to you, and that is God has a way of taking the things that go around in a circle and the things that go straight and have them guide them toward a specific end that he has in mind, so that all things work together for good to those who love the Lord. In other words, everything that has happened in your life, everything that has happened to you has not happened in a haphazard way. It has happened because God had a purpose in developing you into the person that he has designed for you to become. And all of us are in the process of becoming. We have not yet arrived. And that's what Paul is saying. I don't consider myself to have attained these things yet, but the things which have happened to me, they actually happen even though you are seeing them from your own carnal mindset, your human mindset, as something that is detrimental in my life. God has actually used these negative experiences to bring forth the gospel. And that's what Paul was trying to say. That was one of the things that was on his mind, is that if we can understand how to process these lives that God has given to us to live, it will enrich the meaning of everything that happens in our life. If we can tap into the spiritual dimension of what takes place in our lives. So you are here today, you woke up. There is a physical component to that, but there is also a spiritual component to that. If you can tap into the spiritual component, it helps to enrich everything else. There are a lot of people who woke up this morning, but they didn't think about going to church. There are a lot of people who woke up this morning, but they never crossed their mind to give God the praise. There were a lot of people who woke up, but they couldn't say that you get the glory, that you get the honor out of my life. There is a spiritual component to your life that is alive in you, and you need to understand that the reason you are here today is that that spiritual component is alive. So that was a moment to praise God, because we are spiritually awake. We are alive spiritually. Now that we are alive, the second thing that's on my mind is, what are we going to do? What happens next? Okay, we got this, that we are alive. We understand that the things which have happened to us have happened because God has a purpose for our lives, and God has a plan for our lives. But how many of you want to do better in 2023? You want to do better. How many of you mastered 2022 and you don't have anything to strive toward in 2023? Doc, I'm good. 2022 was perfect. I figured life all out and I'm good. No, we want to do better. Isn't that right? But how many of you know that in order to do better, you will be required to do some things that you will enjoy doing and some things that will be cumbersome to you? How many of you realize that all of the things that you will be required to do in 2023 in order to become better may not always feel good while you're doing them? It may not even feel good while you're in the process of going through the things which God has already ordained will happen in your life in this year. So what I wanted to talk about today is found, one of the things that Paul is on his mind is found in the second chapter. We looked at what happens in the first chapter as he tells them that the things which have happened, those things that were on his mind, the things which have happened, they happen ultimately so that God would get the glory, as the blended voices just finished singing. And so in chapter 2, verse 14, Paul says, "Do all things without complaining and disputing, that you may become blameless and harmless children of God." Do all things. Do all things. Do In other words, if you find yourself murmuring or complaining about a situation you are in or a task that you have been assigned, you've missed the mark of the thing that's on Paul's mind when he writes to the church at Philippi. He says, "Do all things, everything that you do, without grumbling or arguing or complaining or murmuring." If you are a wife or a husband, if you are a usher a choir member,
Come on, Reverend.
or you function on a ministry, if you work the AV and the people in the pews start pointing their finger at you and telling you they can't hear, do all things without grumbling. See, there are certain tasks that you are asked to do because they are designed to get you closer to the place that God has ordained for your life. And sometimes the things that you are asked to do or tasked to do, you might not want to do them. You've got to take care of your body. You've got to make sure that you exercise. I get no amens on that, D. They just said, keep going, keep going, keep going. We're going to provide you with some items that we're going to ask. Like, I enjoy food. I'm not even going to say what kind of food, because it doesn't matter. I like food. And I like fried food. And I was talking to my friend, and he said, yeah, one of the things we're going to give up during this fast is fried chicken. And I told myself, self, what would Apostle Paul do? And so what I'm trying to help you to understand is that when it comes to doing the things that we are called to do, listen to what Paul writes in Romans. Is it okay if I just take a moment to share that with you? Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Listen. He says, now I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do, this I keep on doing. Now, if I do what I do not want to do, it is no longer I who do it, but it is sin living in me that does it. So I find this law at work. Although I want to do good, evil is right there with me. For in my inner being, I delight in God's. You know what? I like the way the message says it. Let me see if I can find it in the message. He says, he says, I know Brother Michael liked this. He says, but I need something more. For I know the law, but I still can't keep it. And if the power of sin within me keeps sabotaging my best interests, I obviously need help. I realize that I don't have what it takes. I can will it, but I can't do it. I decide to do good, but I don't really do it. I decide not to do bad, but then I do it anyway. My decisions, such as they are, don't result in actions. Something has gone wrong deep within me, and it gets the better of me every time. It happens so regularly that it's predictable. The moment I decide to do good, sin is there to trip me up. I truly delight in God's commands, but it's pretty obvious that not all of me joins in that delight. Parts of me covertly rebel. And just when I least expect it, they take charge. I've tried everything and nothing helps. I'm at the end of my rope. Is there anyone who can do anything for me? Isn't that the real question? You get where he's going. He's writing to the church and he's saying, I understand that there are some things that you've got to do. The gospel must be preached. The people must be developed. There must be some edification. And some of you are engaged in this work while others are sabotaging your effort. And those of you who are working hard are upset about those who are sabotaging. And then there are others who are making mockery of that which you are working hard. So you're not making the progress that you think you ought to be making, and you become upset with the work that you've been assigned to do, and you start complaining and murmuring. And I'm telling you that everything you do it without complaining. I think I'm trying to help somebody here. I'm trying to help you to understand that in order to do what Paul is saying to the church here at Philippi, there are a few things that you need to take into consideration. The first one is that it is impossible to do this without two things. The first one is, in order to do all things without murmuring, it requires devotion. Did you hear that? In order to do all things without murmuring, it requires devotion. That means that you are giving yourself away to a cause regardless of the impact that it is having on you psychologically. Devotion. Pure devotion. Paul said, I want to do it, but I can't. And what Paul realized is that most of us are devoted to ourselves. Oh my. I just said that, didn't I? I can't even claim that it was a Freudian slip. We are devoted to our own instant gratification. What feels good in the moment. In order to do this without grumbling and complaining, however, it requires devotion. And in order to be devoted, because we are devoted to ourselves, it requires dissolution. What? In other words, we have to dissolve ourselves of ourselves in order to be devoted to the cause of Christ. All right, I'm going to do that. Somebody said, make it plain. That was my wife. I got to go home, and she's going to tell me I didn't make it plain. So I'm going to make it plain for you. We're in Philippians chapter 2. The beginning of Philippians chapter 2, Paul says, therefore, if there is any consolation in Christ, if any comfort of love, if any fellowship of the Spirit, if any affection and mercy, fulfill my joy by being like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit. I'm going to read it in the New Living. Is there any encouragement from belonging to Christ? Any comfort from his love? Any fellowship together in the Spirit? Are your hearts tender and compassionate? Then make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, and working together with one mind and purpose. Don't be selfish. Oh. Don't be selfish. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Here we go. I think I mentioned the word dissolution, didn't I? And you know what dissolution means? It means to dissolve yourself of yourself. Sometimes we get so full of ourselves that we get in our own way of the blessings that God has in store for us. When we think things ought to go the way we think they ought to go and they don't go that way, we get so upset we start grumbling and complaining and arguing and upset, and we don't do what God has asked us to do without grumbling, but we do it with an attitude. We get a little upset, we get mad and angry, and we don't want to talk to this person or that person, but we forget that just like you think of yourself highly, the word says think of the other person as more highly than you think of yourself. And the only way you can do that is to be devoted to Christ. And the only way you can be devoted to Christ is to get yourself out of the way. And as long as you are in the way, you can't do what Paul is instructing them to do. And that is to get out of the way so that God can get the glory out of the thing that he's assigned you to do. Now you got to understand what he's saying here. He's saying that when you want to do good, I know you don't mean to get upset. I know you don't mean to grumble. I know you don't mean to complain. I know you don't mean to argue, but evil is always present. So the enemy knows what's going to upset you. So he makes sure to put the person who's going to rub you the wrong way in the right spot. And when they get in the right spot, it causes you to lose focus on your devotion. But when you are devoted to Christ, then nothing else matters. But you can't be devoted to Christ if you're still in the way. So here's what he said. You must have the same attitude that Jesus Christ had. You got to have the same thing on your mind that Jesus had on his mind. And Jesus had this on his mind. He had you on his mind. He had me on his mind. And no matter what came his way, he stayed focused because he was devoted to the thing that was required for him to do. And the only way he could stay focused on the thing that was required for him to do was to stay say, Lord, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. Here he is. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Sometimes you got to be willing to let go of the title. You have to be willing to let go of the position. You got to be willing to let go of the role. You just got to be what God has called you to be so that you can do what God has called you to do without murmuring, without complaining, without arguing, without getting upset and angry. Instead, this is here you go. Here it is. This is a good definition of dissolving yourself. He gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God. That's called devotion. When I humble myself in obedience to God, I can do what God has assigned me to do because I'm not in the way. When my ego gets in the way, I can't stand it when you hit me that way, when you speak to me that way, when you treat me that way, because you've offended my ego. But if my ego is dead, I don't really care how you come at me. All I know is I've got an assignment to do, and I'm not going to let any demon from hell stop me from accomplishing my assignment. Sometimes I might get accused of some things that I haven't really done. Sometimes I might be misunderstood. Sometimes you might think that I'm trying to accomplish one thing when I'm not even there at all. But I'm going to stay focused because I've dissolved myself of all of the things you're trying to do to hit my ego. See, I have had this thought. I've had this thought. I remember when President Biden first ran for presidency. He was a friend of my former pastor. And I remember him coming to the church, and I remember him running really hard. And he wanted it so bad. He was willing to do some plagiarism. And they caught him. He never got it. He retired, was chilling out at Libby's restaurant, just doing his own thing. And then it was time for him to be exalted. And the amazing thing is that sometimes God won't promote you until it doesn't matter or not, whether or not you are promoted. You ever been in a situation like that? You wanted something so bad, and when you wanted it, you couldn't get it. And then when you didn't even need to have it anymore for your ego, God says, here it is. You wanted it all this time for you, but I wanted you to have it for me because I could use you in that position. I could use you in that capacity. But before I could use you, I needed you to be devoted to something greater than you. And then I need you to be willing to dissolve yourself of who you are so that I can lift you up and use you for my glory, so that God gets all of the glory, that God gets all of the praise, that God gets all of the honor, because now you're where I need you to be for my purposes. What I'm trying to get you to understand is that in 2023, there are some places where God would like for you to serve. We're going to ask you, I'm telling you now, we're going to ask you to serve. And you might choose to say yes. You might choose to say no. That's going to be between you and God. If we've prayed and we've asked you, you might be better off saying yes. And the reason that you may be better off saying yes is it's not because of what you can get or what you can do, but it's because of what you receive as a result of being devoted to a cause that's bigger than you, that will help you dissolve yourself. Now, you may be working in the church, but what you do in the church is going to bless your life somewhere else where you're not even expecting the blessing to show up. God just may be using the church as the grounds for which to strengthen and increase your life. I've got some things on my mind. I've got something else on my mind, and I'm going to let you wait until next week to find out what else I have on my mind. I'm going to leave you with this. I told you that in order to do everything without complaining, that's going to be tough. Some of y'all going to mess that up before you get out of the church. I know you are. I know it is. Some of you sitting in your seat right now, golly. Man, how much longer is he going to be? Does he not know the football game comes on today? We still got communion to do. So I know some of y'all gonna mess this. Y'all gonna mess it up. You're gonna mess it up. I'm telling you, you're gonna mess it up. So this I'm gonna give you this, and then I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna tell you next week. The way that you do this is, number one, you have to be what? Devoted. First of all, you got to do something. You can't sit in the church and just don't do nothing. So let's just start with that. First, he said you got to do something. But when you do whatever you're doing, you got to be devoted. And the only way you can really be truly devoted is you got to what? Dissolve yourself. Now, I will promise you that it is extremely hard to dissolve yourself without the habit of the Spirit. Not going to get into it today, but Paul ends in Romans chapter 7 by saying, who can help me dissolve myself? And when he arrives in Romans chapter 8, he says the only way we can do this thing is through the Spirit. There is therefore now no condemnation to them that walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. And he's got the habit of the spirits in Romans chapter 8. Blows my mind. You will not dissolve yourself without the practice of the habit of the Holy Spirit. So in order to do this, as we move into 2023, I want to encourage you again. This is not a series that we are going to be working through for 2 months or 3 months or 6 months. The habit of the Spirit is for a lifetime. Amen. Let us pray.
Thank you for joining us. See you next week. We upload our podcast every Sunday at 7 p.m. Thanks again, and have a great day.